You can now speak through the keyboard.
Thank you. I'm going to play the first movement of a Beethoven sonata. It's called the Waldstein because it was dedicated to Count Waldstein, who was his patron, who basically gave him a shitload of money and said, don't worry about the bills, just write. And incidentally, if there is anyone here in the audience, these things cost a fortune, I'm telling you. The thing I love about it is that I think one of the big myths about a lot of classical music is that it requires active listening. You have to really concentrate. And actually, I don't think that's true for a lot of it. I think you can turn the lights out, put your arm around your girlfriend, and just let it wash over you and enjoy it. This piece in particular I love because the first movement, Beethoven had just got a new piano. It's a bit like when Stephen gets his iPhone 5 next week. The enthusiasm is he rips it open and he sits down and it's got more notes and it's got another pedal and bigger sound. And what he does, I'm sure lots of you have had piano lessons, the three most basic building blocks of piano playing are scales, arpeggios, and chords. And for 8 minutes, all he does, he takes these three simple building blocks and turns it into a work of just towering genius. So, Beethoven. This is the Waldstein, first movement.
Can I have a show of hands on those of you who like the idea of the pianist introducing the music at the beginning? And you made the point earlier that...
my father was a chorister at St. Paul's. He was a marvellous amateur pianist, and he started taking me to concerts when I was very, very young, and I was taught how to sit incredibly still and never ever to move or rustle paper, which I completely understood, and I obeyed and would listen. But I was always absolutely astonished that musicians would come onto a stage full of people anxious to see them. I saw people like, Benjamin Britten come on to play the piano, and they would go and they would sit at the stool and they would play and then they'd walk off. They'd bow and never say a word. And all you have was this ghastly piece of paper with pretentious nonsense. There's a magnificent essay by one of our greatest music critics, surprisingly, to those who don't remember how good he was, George Bernard Shaw, who really made his living before he wrote plays as a music critic. And he said, I shall now analyze a speech by the playwright William Shakespeare in the manner of your common music critic. The speech takes the form of a soliloquy, and it is the opening subject is the verb of existence stated in its infinitive form. It is followed by the conjunction of alternative, or, and then a negation of the original subject, to be or not to be. He said, that is the sort of nonsense people write about music now, and that is why people don't go to concerts. And I'm afraid it's still true. You look at these bloody... And James, you go to James, whether he's playing in a small, a small venue or in a festival, and he gets somebody, he talks to music. You talk about your passion for that particular piece of music. You don't pretend it to be a history lesson necessarily, but it seems to me it creates a relationship between straight away the audience and the musician.
Can I also ask another show of hands, whether it made a difference that he's dressed in jeans and sneakers?
Again with the clothes, come on.
I mean,
who made these rules?
Is the format of the classical concert, which puts a lot of people off.
Yeah.
I mean, you have the whole orchestra coming in monkey suits, and you're all in normal clothes. And as Stephen said, they come on, they move off, they don't utter a word. Half of them are actually looking sideways. You're looking at their shoulders. I mean, there's no connection, and that's one of the problems, I think.
I think there are notable exceptions, thank goodness. Maren Alsop, almost always, either before or after. I think she usually does it after, doesn't she? She'll stay behind after a concert and tell you what she's just played and why she played it. She'll turn around, like Bernstein did, and there's no coincidence there.
Yes, there are great people like Bernstein who arise, like Richard Feynman in physics, who become great communicators and make an enormous difference. And it is worth, in all the depression that may have descended upon us in thinking that the classical music world is dead, is to remember that this year's prom season sold more tickets than ever before since Henry Wood first founded the promenade concerts, and it's a finite space, the Albert Hall. I mean, admittedly, there are spillovers into the parks that never existed before. So it's not all bad news as we go into the break.
And I'm afraid we're intruding into the second half already. So without further ado, I want to end the first half with an interval with another piece of music, which again James is going to tell you about, which you like.
It's a very short one, don't worry. It's by a guy called Moskovsky. He was a great composer, but most famous for his book of studies, which is a kind of a manual for a Formula One driver. So you give it to the guy and he reads up on it, and then if he can do it, he'll be the next Lewis Hamilton. It's the same with the piano. If you can play all of these studies, there's pretty much you can play anything. And what I love about it is that there's probably 30 notes a second, and it's only about 90 seconds long. And yet, to learn it, it's probably about 35 hours of just painstaking slog. Anyway, so this is the Moskovsky. He was an amazing composer, had the most enormous moustache as well. Wrong moustache, right?